My hands move slowly, dusting the simple frame of an old photograph. It shows a boy, all knees and elbows and serious eyes, clutching a football. Around me, the room is quiet, clean, modest, a world away from the roaring stadiums and flashing lights. My story is not about fame. It is not about golden trophies or the roar of a million chants. My story is about the sound of rain on a tin roof, a relentless, hollow drumming that seeped into our bones and our dreams. It is about the weight a child chose to carry, a weight of hope and desperation, long before his shoulders were broad enough for the world to see.
E Maria Dolores dos Santos Aveiro.
And that intense boy in the photograph, my youngest son, is Cristiano Ronaldo. This is our story, a mother's story, not of glamour, but of a love that watched a dream become an empire and then had to whisper to the empire to remember the dream. This is a story of quiet strength, of a foundational truth that no brand, no fortune, could ever erase. It is the most profound family drama, written not in headlines, but in the silent language of a mother's heart, a real-life story of sacrifice and soul. We lived in Funchal, on the island of Madeira, in a small house on a hill. The walls were thin, and the roof was made of corrugated tin, a humble material that shaped the soundtrack of our lives. When the Atlantic storm swept in, the rain would hammer down on that metal with a fury, a sound like 1,000 frantic fingers tapping, demanding to be let in. The cold damp would seep through, a chill that no blanket could fully warm. My husband, Jose, was a kind man haunted by a war he brought home inside him, a silent battle that often spoke through the bottle. He worked as a kit man at the local club, Andorinha, and it was there that our Cristiano first found his purpose, his escape in a ball. But our home knew too much silent tension, too much shouted frustration born of poverty and powerlessness. Cristiano was my fiery one, my sensitive soul wrapped in a tough exterior. He wasn't interested in school. He saw a future of laying bricks or mending nets, a future that felt like a closed door. All his light, all his formidable will, was poured onto the cracked concrete of the streets, where he would play for hours, missing meals, until the last purple light of dusk faded. I carry a guilt, a shadow that time has softened but never erased. When I was pregnant with Cristiano, our circumstances were so desperate, our poverty so deep and seemingly unending, that I pleaded with the doctor to help me, to not go through with the pregnancy. The fear of bringing another mouth to feed into that tin-roofed struggle was overwhelming. It is a mother's most secret shame, a moment of weakness carved from exhaustion. He would later learn of it and joke, "Look, Mom, you wanted to abort me, and now I'm the one who supports everyone." But his laughter, though warm, could never quite reach the ache in my own heart, the memory of that fear. The fault line in our family was never greed. It was survival. It was the relentless pressure of that drumming rain, the fear of the next storm, the meteorological kind, and the kind that brewed inside my husband. We were a unit bound by a shared struggle, a silent pact to keep going. When Cristiano was just 15, a doctor found a racing heart, a condition that required surgery. He said if Cristiano didn't have the operation, he could never play football professionally again. I saw a terror in my son's eyes that no child should ever know, the terror of seeing his only bridge out of that life, the only thing he was truly good at, being dismantled before he could cross it. He chose the surgery, a quiet, immense bravery. And when he woke from it, something had shifted. The fiery passion was still there, but it was now fused with a steely, unbreakable resolve. Football was no longer just a game. It was his destiny, his sole responsibility. Then the call came. Sporting Lisbon wanted him, a boy of just 12, to leave his home, his island, everything he knew. I remember the ache of that goodbye at the bus station as if it were yesterday. I held his young face, still soft with childhood, in my hands and felt his hot tears on my thumbs. He was so small, carrying a bag and a ball, leaving to shoulder all our hopes on a journey across the sea. The years that followed were a blur of sacrifice, a tapestry woven with the threads of longing. We saved every penny for the expensive phone calls, his voice cracking with homesickness on the line. I saved his letters, the handwriting growing more confident, talking of training, of missing my cooking, of being so alone. Then came Manchester United, and the world began to learn his name. With his first real, significant money, the very first thing he did, before any car or flashy watch, was to buy us a new house. A proper house with a solid, silent roof. For Papa, he said, his voice full of pride. It was his father's dream. But my José's health, ravaged by his private wars, was failing. He left us when Cristiano was just 20, far too young, before the true avalanche of glory began. The loss devastated my son in a way I had never seen before. It carved a hollow space in him that no trophy could ever fill. My father, he saw nothing. He'd say years later, his voice thick with a grief that time had not diluted. He carried that grief like a permanent weight, a stone in his chest. His relentless pursuit of success, of more, always more, became a monument to the father who couldn't stay to see it. He was trying to build something so high, so bright, that his father might see it from wherever he was. And then, the money stopped being a stream and became a river, a flood, an ocean. It built an empire. It wasn't just football anymore. It was hotels and glittering cities bearing his name, his silhouette on clothing, his smile promoting fragrances, his brand on gyms and underwear. He became CR7, a global brand, a billionaire. The financial reports talked of his worth in numbers that felt imaginary. I was proud, of course, fiercely proud of the boy who had worked so hard. But alongside the pride, a subtle, quiet distance began to grow. The family home he bought us was now just one line item in a vast, sprawling portfolio of assets. Our simple, longed-for dinners were increasingly interrupted by calls from agents, managers, and partners. The people around him multiplied, a new kind of family. Advisors with sharp suits and sharper smiles, PR executives who spoke of narrative and optics, business partners who saw a global icon, not my son. They spoke a language of profit margins, brand equity, and market saturation, a cold, efficient language that felt alien to the warm, messy, emotional world of our past. The betrayal, when it began, was not a single, sharp knife in the dark. It was slow. It was a quiet, creeping replacement. It was the dawning, chilling realization that to this magnificent empire he was building, we, his mother, his father's memory, our struggles in that tiny house, were becoming a story, a useful, poignant origin myth. We were the emotional core of this CR7 brand, the human element that made the billionaire relatable. Our pain, our poverty, the memory of his father's illness, these sacred, painful parts of our lives were being woven, thread by thread, into a marketable narrative to sell products, to build loyalty, to add depth to a logo. My son's life, our most private battles, were being turned into a commodity, emotional story to be leveraged. The turning point, the moment the quiet unease crystallized into a clear, cold understanding, did not come with a shouted argument or a slammed door. It came with a document, a contract, a proposal that referred to family lore as brand equity. It was a gradual pressure, a series of small incidents that stacked one upon the other like bricks, building a gilded cage around our past. First, it was the museum. They built this CR7 museum in Madeira, a shining, modern building filled with his golden boots, his framed jerseys, his Ballon d'Or trophies. They even renamed our island's airport the Cristiano Ronaldo International Airport. My homeland, the place of our struggle, was being rebranded in his commercial image. I would walk through that museum, a VIP guest, and see our old family photographs, pictures of me and José, pictures of the boys as children, displayed as public exhibits. A piece of our lived history was behind glass, with a neat placard explaining it. Tourists would stand before the photograph of our old tin-roofed house and murmur about humble beginnings, some with genuine awe, others with a kind of pity. It felt like our poverty, our most difficult years, were on display, sanitized and packaged for consumption. Then came the business proposals that explicitly involved family. A new line of CR7 legacy products was suggested, a series that would tap into the core emotional journey of his rise. Someone pitched a high-budget biopic, focusing on his early life and family challenges. They wanted me to consult, to sit in a room with writers and share private, painful memories of Jose's struggles, of the nights with the drumming rain, of my own desperation during that pregnancy. They called it authentic detail. I felt a cold nausea rise in my throat. My husband's pain was not a plot point. My moment of despair was not a character beat. They were the sacred, scarred tissues of our real lives. Most painfully, I watched the pressure reshape Cristiano himself. He was no longer just a phenomenal athlete. He was the CEO, the figurehead, the living logo of CR7. The fiery, emotional, sometimes petulant boy was being advised, coached, to be more calculated, his public image meticulously managed, every outburst analyzed for brand damage. When controversy struck, a red card in a crucial World Cup match, a heated exchange caught on camera, the public debate felt less about sport and more about brand management. Was he being portrayed as the passionate victim or the arrogant villain? The narrative seemed to shift based on what best served the commercial entity. I saw the toll it took on him. In interviews, he spoke of people hating him, saying it fueled him. But in his eyes, I sometimes saw a flicker of the little boy who just wanted to be loved for playing football, not for the empire he built. The private cost was a deep, profound loneliness, a different kind of poverty. Our phone calls became shorter, scheduled between meetings and appearances. The conversations were more logistical. How were the kids? When was the next visit? And less about the heart. The financial strain of our past was gone, replaced by a new, more confusing emotional strain. I had my son, the global icon, but I missed my son, Cristiano. I feared he was being lost, buried alive inside the magnificent, self-constructed monument of his own legend. The revelation, the moment of stark clarity, happened on a rare, stolen afternoon of quiet. He was visiting Madeira, exhausted at the end of a long, grueling season. He was in the living room of the house he bought us, the one with the silent roof, speaking in low, tired tones on a video call with his business team. I was in the kitchen, as I always was, preparing his favorite childhood meal, trying to touch that part of him I missed. Through the open doorway, their voices carried in fragments. They were discussing numbers, staggering numbers, the asset valuation of his social media presence, hundreds of millions of followers. Then the talk turned to leveraging the core narrative for a new venture, a film production studio he was launching. One voice, clear, analytical, and utterly cold, said, "The mother's story is the key emotional hook. The poverty, the father's alcoholism, the abortion story, it's raw. It's relatable. It humanizes the brand beyond the athlete." I froze. The knife in my hand, chopping onions for his meal, stopped midair. The sharp, pungent smell of the onions filled my senses, but I was miles away. The words hung in the air like poison gas. The abortion story humanizes the brand. It wasn't a hot rush of anger that hit me first. It was a slow, cold wave, a profound and devastating clarity that sank to the very bottom of my soul.
We were not just a family to them.
We were not even just a story. We were intellectual property. Our deepest pains were brand attributes. My most vulnerable moment, my greatest shame, was a key emotional hook. In that instant, the entire world reframed itself. The power balance, which I had seen as so lopsided, me, an old woman from a small island, him, a global billionaire, shifted. I realized I held a power they could never buy, never trademark, never truly own. I was the keeper of the real story. I was the living archive of the truth that existed before the brand, the witness to the boy who cried under the tin roof, not the icon who owned hotels. I held the unvarnished, unmarketable memory of his father as a man, not a narrative device. That truth was my power, and it was utterly indigestible to their machine. I did not shout. I did not storm into the room. I took a deep, shuddering breath, finished chopping the onion, and let the tears that fell be blamed on its vapor. I finished cooking and we ate together. I watched him, my beautiful, tired, world-famous son, pushing food around his plate, his mind clearly still on deals and images and pressures I could scarcely imagine. My heart ached with a love so vast it was painful, a love now intertwined with a fierce, maternal resolve. I would not fight his empire. I would not give him more drama, more headlines about a feud with his mother. That would just be more fuel for the machine. My plan formed not in a boardroom, but in the quiet of my own heart. It was a plan built of memory, of truth, of tangible love. I began to write. Not for a book, not for publication, but for him. In a simple notebook, I wrote down the real details. I described the exact sound of the rain on the tin, not as a poetic metaphor, but as the annoying, sleep-stealing drumbeat it was. I wrote about the specific smell of his father's old kit man jacket, of grass, of sweat, of something faintly sour. I wrote about the precise, heartbreaking blue of the sky the day he left for Lisbon, a blue that seemed to mock my sadness. I wrote about the exact weight and warmth of his head on my shoulder when he was 7 and had a fever, and when he was 20 and grieving his father. I gathered photographs, the ones not deemed iconic enough for the museum. The blurry ones, the silly ones, the ones where someone's eyes were half closed, the ones from birthdays in our old sitting room, the background a testament to our ordinary life. My countermove was to reclaim our narrative by preserving its soul, its unmarketable authenticity. I also reached out, quietly, to the pillars of the real past. I had coffee with his godfather, who remembered him as a scrawny kid too competitive for his own good. I visited his first coach at Andorinha, who still had the signed card a young Cristiano gave him. We didn't talk about brand value. We talked about him. We reinforced the truth of who he was, from the people who knew him when he was no one. I also made one simple, firm, practical decision. I politely, but unwaveringly, declined every single subsequent request to consult on any business project that sought to use our family story. When the enthusiastic young producer from the new film studio called, full of bright ideas, I said calmly, "I am happy to talk to my son, Cristiano, about his father, about our life. I am not available for a branding meeting to discuss emotional hooks. Please do not call me for this again." The stunned silence on the other end of the line was a small, satisfying victory. The climax of this quiet struggle did not happen in a lawyer's office or on a public stage. It arrived during a family gathering for his birthday. The house was filled with noise and love, his siblings, his partner, his own beautiful children. The gifts from the world were piled in a corner, extravagant watches from fellow superstars, custom-made sneakers from designers, abstract art from famous artists, all glossy and expensive and impersonal. When the frenzy of gift-giving subsided and the children were playing with their new toys, I brought out my present. It was a small, flat, rectangular package wrapped in simple paper. He took it with a curious, affectionate smile, used to grand gestures. He tore the paper off. Inside was a plain black frame, and behind the glass, mounted on a backdrop of dark velvet, was a single, rugged, unadorned piece of aged, corrugated tin, about the size of his hand. It was cleaned but not polished, its rust stains and subtle dents still visible. Next to it on a small, typed card were the words, "A fragment of the roof from Rua do Quim, Santo Antonio." It sheltered us. It heard our dreams. It drummed the rhythm of our struggle. And below it a small photograph, him, aged about 6 or 7, fast asleep on my lap, his head tilted back, mouth slightly open, a battered football still held loosely in his arms. The room, so full of chatter and laughter a moment before, fell into a deep, palpable silence. Everyone looked at the gift, then at his face. He stared at it. His expression, usually so controlled, so media-trained, underwent a profound transformation. The CEO, the brand, the icon, it all melted away. His eyes, which faced the blinding flashbulbs of 1,000 cameras without a flinch, welled up with tears that he did not try to hide. His jaw tightened, and he swallowed hard. He didn't say a word. He simply reached out, not for the frame, but for my hand. His grip was strong, almost desperate, and he held on, looking from the piece of rusty, humble metal to my face and back again. In that silence, the real confrontation occurred. The entire billion-dollar empire of CR7, with its global influence and complex machinery, met the unassailable, irreducible truth of a piece of tin. It was the literal foundation, the shelter under which everything began. It was worthless on any stock market, yet it was the most valuable thing in the room. I had not attacked his world. I had simply reminded him, and everyone present, of the soil from which it grew. The payoff was not vindication or victory over him. The payoff was the silent, shared understanding. It was the tears he let his family see. It was the crumbling of the wall, for a moment, between the icon and the sun. The aftermath of such an emotional moment is always quiet. True boundaries aren't set with loud declarations, but with a new, mutual understanding that settles into the space between you. He never sent another business proposal about family legacy my way. The tone of people around him shifted. The brand managers now treated me with a respectful distance, as his mother, not as a content source. The small, crucial act of grace, the proof that the lesson had reached his heart, came months later. He was finalizing one of his many substantial philanthropic donations, a gesture he has always made with genuine intent. He called me, not through an assistant, and asked a simple, beautiful question. May, what would have helped a boy like I was? Not with the football, but with the other things. The hard things at home. My own tears came then, quiet and proud. We talked, mother and son, about support for families living with addiction, about creating safe, quiet after-school spaces for children whose homes are filled with tension, where they could just be kids. A significant part of his donation was quietly directed to initiatives supporting exactly that. He is still CR7. The machine still runs. He will still have his moments of controversy, his breathtaking goals, his colossal business deals. But now, I see him making a conscious effort. He takes his own children to see the old neighborhood, points out the streets he played on, tells them stories about their grandfather that are about the man, not the myth. He speaks of the roof sometimes. The empire remains, but he seems to remember more often that he is also the boy who lived under that tin, and that boy's mother is still here, guarding the truth of him. The moral of this long, real-life story, this epic family drama played out in public and private, is not that money or fame are corrupting forces to be rejected. They are not. The moral is that every empire, no matter how dazzling, how globally recognized, is built upon a foundation. That foundation might be a piece of land, a revolutionary idea, a moment of inspiration, or a dream born in hardship under a leaky roof. My role, as his mother, was never to tear down what he built with his incredible talent and will. My role was to be the keeper of the foundation, to gently, firmly remind the builder, when the towers get so high he might forget, what lies beneath. To remind him that the mansion is not the home. The home is the place where you can lay down the heavy crown, where you are not a brand, but a son, a father, a man. A legacy is not just what you build in the blinding light of the world's admiration. It is also what you tenderly remember and honor in the quiet shadows of your own heart. If this journey of a mother's quiet love and the strength of memory touched your heart, please let us know. Share this story with someone who understands that the truest battles are often fought in silence. Like this video if you believe in guarding the real stories beneath the glittering surfaces. And subscribe to this channel for more deep, calm, reflective tales about the real lives behind the headlines, the emotional stories that remind us of what endures. Thank you for listening.